Hello and welcome to this week's Friday Forum Live with me, Sarah Glazer. As regular viewers will know, we broadcast every Friday from Point Blank Studio here in East London to bring you exclusive tutorials, artist interviews and the very latest industry insight. We have a real treat for you today because Ganesh Singaram, who has worked with Pharrell, Swedish House Mafia and Kanye West, is joining us to look at how to get the perfect vocal balance in your mix. Hello again. If you've been wondering how to get the vocals sitting just right in your mix, then this is the show for you. As joining me today is mixing master, and we are delighted to say point blank instructor Ganesh Singaram. Remember, you can find out more about our mixing and mastering courses in London, Los Angeles and online by visiting our website pointblanklondon.com. As always, we are broadcasting to all you lovely people 100% live, so get your questions into the comments and we'll answer them towards the end of the show. So Ganesh, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you going?
I'm very well, thank you. Before we get right into it, can you tell us why a high quality vocal mix is so important?
Okay, so I think vocals is a big thing to sort of get right. Obviously, it's the main sort of element of the song, right? So you want to carry it, I guess the content, the message and the emotion of the song. So, you know, having a nice vocal sound to sort of complement the music and deliver that message and that journey, I think it's a important thing to get right. So, you know, we're going to go through a lot of different things today. So just to sort of make a vocal sit inside a track rather than sort of being, you know, underneath it, sort of standing behind the band in a way or to in front, it can sort of distract you a little bit. So hopefully with the stuff we go through today, it'll get a little bit more interesting for people. I'll just get started, I guess, with the basics, like certain EQs, certain compressors and things like that. And then I'm going to get into effects quite a bit.
Right, okay.
So I use effects more for building transitions and creating tension and release in songs.
Yeah.
But as we go along, you'll sort of see how it all pans out.
Okay.
So let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
So you sort of get the idea
Yeah.
of sort of the emotion, I guess the intent of the vocal. But, you know, the music's sort of at a spot, but the vocal feels a little bit detached.
Yeah, it's not sitting in it nicely.
Yeah, it's not sitting in it. So, you know, this is a point where you need to start sort of getting all the core elements in. Like I usually do drums, bass, and try to get the vocal in as soon as possible. It doesn't have to be a final thing, but just sort of get it in to have a reference of where the song is going to go. But I'll just solo the vocal and we can start tweaking some settings. So what I usually do at the start, I mean, it depends on the singer obviously as well, but I usually de-ess the vocal just to get rid of the sibilants first of all.
Okay, yeah.
The reason for that is I just sort of craft the sound in a certain way by removing, you know, those annoying sibilances.
Yeah, though that's kind of noises.
Yeah. So everyone has sibilances at different sort of frequencies, but usually it's, I think around 5K to maybe about, you know, 10K usually. So as I said, every singer's different, but you just have to figure out what works with this singer. So this particular one, I've got a Logic de-esser on, and you can sort of hear what it's doing.
And I feel myself.
So you can see it working when the activity starts sliding out.
Yeah.
As I hold
this compressor can, this de-esser, sorry, can be a little bit complicated, but you just have to sort of tweak it to a spot. You got to be careful not to give people a lisp as well.
Yes, take it
that
too
can get a
far
bit
the other
awkward,
way.
you know. So you got to be careful of that. So I firstly get rid of the S's, and then I can start EQing my signal. So rather than doing it at the end, I think, you know, if I push some top end, the de-esser will work harder if it's at the end of the chain. So I sort of get rid of it at the start. With the next plugin that I've got, I'm just sort of going through this quickly because we've got a lot to cover. I've got a EQ going on. So realistically, you know, you don't need anything, you know, under 80 hertz usually, but just try to find a spot where you filter out the bottom end till the vocal sounds clean, but you're not taking out too much of the body of the sound. Also, by cleaning that, you get rid of low-end rumble in the track and the recording. Plus, you're making space for, you know, your kick and bass, which is going to be down there. One thing that I'm doing in particular with this vocal recording is I'm getting rid of the bad frequencies first. So I'm doing more subtractive EQ.
Right, okay.
The reason why is I want to shape the sound first of all to a good spot and then start tweaking it and shaping it a lot more. A bad frequency that usually hangs around a lot of rooms and studios, depending on the treatment, is the frequency is sort of around 200 to 500. It's quite like a boxy frequency. So if you find your vocals have too much air and a like boxy sort of sound like that, you can cut a lot of that out.
So it's going to be in that 200 to...
Yeah, sort of around the 300 to 500 mark.
300 to 500, right.
It's a bad frequency that hangs around a lot of rooms. So with this particular singer, I'm also cutting out 1K because I just find that certain notes that he pushes that frequency a little bit too much, which is a little bit more of a nasal quality in a way.
Ah, okay.
So I sort of cut all that out first. So this is what you get.
And I feel myself
So without.
lifting up as I hold your head
And then back in.
close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind, my
So it's just
mind.
basic EQ, just to sort of get rid of the things I don't want in the vocal.
Yeah.
And then what I do, once I've sort of crafted that sound a bit, I've added a compressor to shape it and control it a bit more. So if I turn this on.
And I feel myself
So without it.
lifting up
With.
as I hold your head.
So it's not compressing too much, but once it starts getting into the chorus where he's really belting it, that's when the compressor is going to shape it a lot more.
Yeah, because there's more dynamic variation.
Yeah, a lot more dynamic. So the thing is, I need to keep the intimate parts, you know, really up front, and then choruses as well need to build in a certain way. So I don't want to compress straight away really hard because then I'm sucking the life out of things.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful of that. You know, I think if you're looking at compression, anything from 2 to 5 dB maybe is gentle. Anything above that, you're starting to get into heavy compression.
Okay.
So the thing is to not fight against a singer when they hit the chorus. You don't want the compressor to be working too hard.
Yeah.
Because when they want to get big, the compressor pulls them back. So you got to be careful of that. With this vocal, I'm just using a slow attack time and a relatively quick release, just to sort of make it a little bit more percussive in a way.
Yeah.
Certain words that I'm trying to sort of enhance a little bit by using those settings. And I'm just using a vintage FET, just because I like the aggression and sound of it for this track. After that, what I'm doing is I'm EQing some good things in the vocals just to sort of enhance certain areas. So I'm adding around about 120 hertz for this particular singer because I just want to increase the body of the vocals.
So making it sound a bit richer, a bit full.
So increasing like the low mids. I think the idea for this track is to make, you know, because it's quite simple in terms of its production, I want that vocal to be really up front.
Yeah.
So he needs to be driving the song. So I'm pushing a lower frequency to sort of give you that intimacy value in a way. Also adding a bit of brightness at around 2.5K, sort of a little bit higher as well. That frequency is going to make it cut through on a lot of different speakers as well.
Right.
So it's a good sort of frequency to push. You got to be careful because some singers push a little bit too hard in that frequency range, and you just got to figure out what works best. So I'm sort of working in stages now, and the top frequency is around 10K, which can be called sizzle all the air of the vocal. So it adds a nice sheen almost to the vocal sound. So I'll just bypass it and give it a play.
And I feel myself lifting up
With the vocal.
as I hold your head close to mine.
Without.
Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind. Whoa, my mind, my
Back
mind,
in.
my
So
mind.
if I put it into the track, let's see what we get.
And I feel myself
Without any other processing.
Yeah.
lifting up as I hold your head
With.
close to mine.
So it's adding the presence to it. It's giving it a little bit more upfrontness.
Yeah.
And it's sort of sitting a little bit better with the track.
My mind.
Yeah, it makes it feel like it's speaking to you.
Yeah, so we're sort of getting there.
So much more
It's-
nicely. Yeah.
It's sort of getting to a good spot. But then it still feels a little bit detached in a way.
Feel myself.
So this is where we have to start using our buses and all the other cool tricks that we're going to go through today.
Oh, okay.
If you can see on the screen, I've got about 8 buses going for the vocals. It's a pretty standard setup that I've got because not all of them are in play, but they all work in certain sections differently.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through them one at a time, but there's also a session that's going to be put out that you can download that will have all the settings on there, so you can check it out from there.
Great.
Yeah, because it can be a lot of stuff to go through. First thing, is the rest of the track's mixed, so the drums have, parallels on them and the bass and stuff like that. So I need the energy level of the vocal to keep up. So what I first get done in my vocal mix is I start paralleling first
Okay.
because I want the energy to be there, and then I start working in all my effects.
Okay, so you're talking about parallel compression.
Parallel
now. So
compression.
when you're kind of compressing in a different way and using the same signal coming in. But
Yeah,
doing it-
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just taking my original signal and sending that to a separate track, and then, either compressing it or EQing it or distorting it a bit differently, and then just mixing that energy in with this track.
So that's quite fashionable now. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's quite. You can get carried away with parallels, but I think it really gives that energy factor that you want in a track.
Okay.
So I'm just going to turn the vocal down, and the settings that I've got for my parallel is pretty similar, but I've just changed the attack and release a little bit. And my ratio is now 6:1 as opposed to my previous compressor, which is so about 4:1. So
Okay.
I'm doing a little bit more of an aggressive move on this. But this is like the attitude factor here. So let's start with the vocal in without the parallel.
And I feel myself lifting up
And then let's bring it in.
as I hold your head close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind.
So without the parallel, you'll feel the vocal almost go back in the mix.
Oh,
Yeah.
my mind, my mind, my mind. Oh, my mind, my mind.
The thing is, the drums and the bass and the piano have a certain impact. So I want to keep the vocal up there as well.
Feel myself
So you can feel the energy difference now as well.
lifting up as I hold your
So now my vocal is sort of competing, I guess, with the rest of the track in terms of level and
Yeah.
energy. But I can do a few more things to sort of impact it a lot more. The next bus that I've got on is bus 2. So on this track, I've actually got a bit crusher on it, which is a pretty cool plugin. So what I do is I just drop the resolution down to 12 bit, so it's not too, I guess, grainy in a way. And then I just drive it a little bit. So the idea for this is I've got the parallel adding the energy factor.
Yeah.
So the idea for this one is it's going to add a nice texture to it.
Right.
So either do it with like a bit crusher or some sort of distortion plugin. The beauty about this is, as the song usually picks up in the choruses in terms of elements and energy, you can automate this in to sort of come up in the chorus and come back down in the verse.
Oh, great, yeah.
So it's a good trick to have up your sleeve when you're mixing, because choruses can be a tricky thing to get right because of all the elements going on.
Yeah.
But when I turn this on, you almost focus more on the low-mid energy that it'll add. It adds a lot of meat, I guess, to the track.
And I feel
I'll go crazy with it in terms
myself
of the level and then pull it back down.
lifting up as I hold
So without it,
your head close to mine.
Yeah.
Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind.
it's a pretty powerful tool, so that's why
Whoa, my mind, my
you
mind.
sort of need to mix
my
it down
mind.
to a nice
Whoa, my
level.
mind, my mind, my mind.
The thing is, if you pull your resolution down to like 8-bit, it can be a little bit too grainy, so
Right, okay.
it becomes too noticeable. But if you drop it down to like 12 or, yeah, I think 12 is a good spot. It just adds that thickness and richness that you want. So it's two different types of parallels. So one is a compressor
Yeah,
and the other one is a type of distortion.
okay.
As I said, once you download the session, you'll be able to have all these sort of features and you can check out the settings and stuff
play
like that.
around with it, yeah.
So it's a good
That's what the
starting point.
weekend's for.
Yeah, no, it's not too bad of a way to spend the weekend. Next thing, I guess, is starting to move on to the effects. So,
Right, okay.
you know, I need to create a bit of interest with the vocals. So the vocal's doing its thing, but it's not special enough yet. So this is when you start getting into the effects and things like that.
Okay.
You got to control yourself with effects because you don't want to distract from the intent of the vocal. It's not about your mixing skills and how crazy you can get the effects. It's about you delivering the message for the song.
Yeah, so it's supportive.
Yeah, it needs to be supportive rather than sort of overpowering the sound.
Okay.
What I tend to do, first of all, is I tend to use mono effects to begin with, just because I don't want to occupy the stereo spectrum too much with a lot of stereo effects. So I choose my mono and stereo effects very carefully in a way.
Okay.
So the idea for this is I've got my vocal really nice and present, but I want to create a little bit of depth behind the vocal.
So are you going to get into reverb?
Reverbs, yeah. Space Design is a really good one, standard Logic plugin. I tend to use plates for vocals. I think it's nice and almost sexy in a way. It's just got a rich tone through it. So I've just gone to medium spaces, plate reverbs, and picked a blue plate, which is quite a nice setting. A cool, I guess some cool parameters for reverb, especially with a plate, is I tend to put a pre-delay of 22 milliseconds. I think it adds a nice bounce to the vocal.
Okay.
And the decay time, I usually go between 1 to like 1.7 seconds, so depending on the vocalist. So I'll just bypass this EQ for a second and solo the vocal.
And I feel myself
Best way to check a reverb and what it's doing
lifting up.
is just stop it and hear the decay.
Yeah.
So you actually know what's going on. So I tend to get a sound first, so I usually
And
crank up my
I
send
feel myself
so I can really hear the actual
lifting
reverb.
up as I hold
And then what I tend to
your
do,
head.
I tend to EQ after some of my effects as well. With this setting that I've got up for my reverb, I'm getting rid of a lot of the low end stuff because I don't need that reintroduced into my track.
Right.
I'm also gutting the 300 to 500 range because it's quite a boomy sort of frequency in the track. Same thing with his vocal, because it pushes at a certain spot. I'm just dipping that out. And the top end, for a lot of digital reverbs, I don't really like the top end too much. So cutting that out makes it feel a little bit more natural to me.
Okay.
So I'm sort of crafting it a little bit more. I'm not letting the reverb dictate what other frequencies it's going to add. So I'm controlling it at every stage. So have a listen to it without the EQ.
And I feel myself lifting up
And then with the EQ.
as I hold your head
And without.
close to mine.
With.
Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind.
By me doing this, it almost gives the reverb a little bit more realness in a way. It doesn't sound too synthetic. Plus with an EQ on, I can push my reverb harder. So I can send more signal to it. And it's not going to be too overpowering. I think the best way to judge your reverb level is obviously put it back in the track, because it can sound great in solo, but that doesn't mean...
Yeah, but how it
gonna
sounds
work.
all together
Yeah.
is important.
So it's always like back and forth, back and forth. So let's put it back in the track and find a nice level for it.
And I feel myself lifting up as I hold your head
So without the reverb.
close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind.
And then with.
Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
It's a very subtle sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be very distracting in a way. I just want to sort of create a little bit of specialness behind the vocals. And then once we start building up things from there, it gets a lot more interesting as well.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get the listener used to a standard sound for the vocal. So they go, okay, this is a normal sound that they're going to be hearing, and then I change it up. So I can push and pull the track in terms of tension and releases just by doing that. So I sort of set the listener up for this particular sound, and then just sort of move it from...
And then surprise them.
Yeah, surprise them. So it's all about keeping the listener interested all the way. So I tend to not go for standard sounds all the way through. I like changing it up.
But that's how you make it personal, though, isn't it?
Well,
you
that's
don't want to
it,
just
you know.
load a load of preset stuff. It's
Yeah.
nice to tweak it and get
no,
it exactly how you want it.
So true. Another thing that I'm doing is I've got a reverb creating depth behind the vocal, but now I'm going to use a slapback delay, which is almost going to pull it out from the reverb a little bit.
Okay.
So it's sort of tricking the listener into making them feel that the vocal is still here, but you still have that space behind them as well. On this, I'm just using a standard echo plugin on Logic, but you can use any type of delay. I tend to use 16th notes because it's nice and tight.
Right.
I think the further out you go, it almost feels like the vocal's getting further away.
Right, yeah.
So having like an eighth note will put the vocal here, but having it at quarter notes is going to push it back even further. So you got to be careful of that. So usually slaps, really tight sort of times, or you could do 16ths with this echo plugin. But once again, I'll go extreme with it so you can hear it.
And I feel myself
Without it.
lifting up as I hold your head.
So the idea for this is going to add a lot more interest and sort of specialness about the vocal. Right now it's pretty loud, but I'm just going to sort of tickle the listener's ears by having it there a little bit.
Yeah.
So once again, put it back in the track and start blending it in. A lot of this stuff is all about balance. If you don't get the settings, well, if you don't get the balance right, it's going to sound off. So
Yeah.
it's all about taste right now.
And I feel myself
A good thing to do if you're a bit hesitant on what level,
lifting up
go extreme
And then bring it back
and then
from
bring
that
it back,
point.
yeah. Because sometimes if you don't push yourself, you don't know what's beyond there. So
Yeah.
always go extreme and then pull it back from there. That was a good tip from my old boss back in Sydney, which I haven't
This is
forgotten.
great. So we're getting double tips
Yeah,
from you
so-
and from
Yeah,
him.
it's all passing down the knowledge.
Lifting up as I hold your head.
So I'll just solo the vocal for a second, and I'll bypass the
Oh,
effects.
my mind, my mind, my mind. Whoa, my mind,
then-
my mind, my mind. Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
That's with everything in.
Well, that's
done
with
so
the
far.
that's with the
all
reverb
buses.
and delay on.
Yeah.
And now it's, if I put it back in the track, it'll almost feel like it's gelled together a little bit more.
Lifting up as I hold your head close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind.
So with the slapback delay and the reverb, it's creating a nice sort of scene for the vocal. So these are all just mono effects right now. So I've got the depth behind the vocal. I've pulled it back almost to the in your face sort of sound in a way with the slapback.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to create some extra width with the vocal. So this is where I'm going to start using stereo effects.
Right.
What I tend to do first of all is I create a lot of different buses that do all different things. So the first bus that I create is a stereo delay, usually for the vocals, and it's on 16th notes, so it's going to push the vocals out that way.
Okay.
So I've got the space, and now I'm just going to make it really wide and big. So I'm just using a standard preset. Haven't really tweaked it that much. Presets are always a good thing.
Ganesh? Did you run out of time?
No, I love starting with presets, you know. And sometimes when you mix, you do get a bit lazy. It's like, I just quickly get through it, you know. But start from presets and then you can just tweak it from there.
Yeah.
And then I'm EQing it again, so I'm not reintroducing frequencies that I don't want. For this instance, I'm actually boosting those frequencies because it almost gives it like a radio voice quality, like an old school sort of sound in a way, which can be pretty cool. So let's start with it on full blast.
And I feel myself
Sort of giving me back, well, that slap back sound, but spread across left and right.
as I hold.
It's really tight, so it's not too in your face and distracting.
Feel myself
And I'll just pull it back down.
lifting up
So now when I start increasing this, it's just going to push the stereo image a bit
your
more.
head close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind,
So
my
without it?
mind. Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
And then with it,
Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
once again, put it back in the track and see how it works.
And I feel myself lifting up as I hold your head close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind. Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
It just adds a cool sort of feel to the song. It just keeps it a little bit interesting as well, so you're not distracting from the vocal, but it's just adding that specialness to move it along.
Yeah.
So the idea for this is that's sort of my standard vocal setup for this song.
Okay.
So reverb, slapback, and a stereo delay. So you get used to that as a listener. This is when I start sort of tweaking it and I can push and pull the song where I want. So the next bit that I'm going to add is a different stereo delay, but this is on 8th notes.
Right.
So it's going to feel like it gets bigger almost.
Okay, so this is something that you'd introduce in the chorus then, or
Yeah.
like the
So-
climax points.
Yeah, exactly. You can sort of push it at spots and then pull it back. So let's start with this on full blast so you can have a listen to it.
And I feel myself lifting up
Without it,
as I hold your head close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind.
adds a little bit of a different movement to it. So have a listen to this and what you can sort of get out of this.
And I feel myself
I'm just going to do manual rides of the bus.
Okay.
lifting up as I hold your head
So you just push it in certain words.
Close to
And then I'll build this section up.
Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind.
Don't give it all away yet.
Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind. Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
So that's adding a lot more interest, and I can progress that build up a lot more.
Yeah.
So in the track, it'll make it a bit more sense.
And I feel myself
Vocals nice and intimate there.
lifting up as I hold your head
And then I'll start building it.
close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind.
Almost feel it getting bigger there.
Yeah.
Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
And then this bit, go a bit more.
Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
So the thing is, once I get to the next section from there, it'll drop back down to a more intimate vibe. So I'm just creating sort of moments of tension,
Yeah.
explosions as well. And then you get back to this sort of intimate sound now.
And who do you think that we
And
are?
I'll just ride this particular delay, the 8th note.
I never knew it would come
Build it here.
this far. Oh, and who do you think that we are?
A lot of this stuff is, I'll spend so much time on automation.
Yeah.
So even though I have 8 buses going, so sometimes even more for vocals, they will all be automated.
Right.
So, you know, in choruses, I'll do different automation with the 16th notes or the 8th notes. And I'll just show you how to quickly do it to help out transitions. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to automate the 16th notes, so the stereo delay. I think that's it.
And I
What I might do at the start, and I'll play this once we sort of get around to it, I'm just going to reduce that all the way down,
Yeah.
and then as the song progresses, because I want this part to be a little bit more intimate, it'll naturally just start growing in
Yeah.
a way. And then say for this bit, I'm just going to automate it up a little bit more. And then towards the end of the line, it's going to progress up. So this is just a 16th note that we're messing around with.
And I feel myself lifting up as I hold your
So
head
standard setup, and then it'll just build.
close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind, my mind. Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind. Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
So it's starting to make the vocal a lot more interesting in the track.
Yeah, it really brings out the vibrato as well.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And he's got such an amazing voice. So the thing is, I don't want to distract anything from that. You know? That's not my job. It's just to help you feel and understand what he's saying a lot more.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I would quickly do is automate the 8th note, so the stereo big delay. So the idea is I don't want it to pop in up until this sort of spot. And same thing, I can build it like that. Levels, obviously, I need to fine tune it, but you hear it in the track.
And I feel myself lifting
The
up
standard sound.
as I hold your head close to mine. Oh, my mind, my mind,
Put it back in the
my
track.
mind. Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
Might drop the level a bit.
Whoa, my mind, my mind, my mind.
A little bit too extreme, but you sort of get the motion of how it's all working.
Yeah.
So you're sort of creating that texture throughout the song, and then you can just drop it in whenever you want or take it out whenever you want. So it's a good sort of trick having different types of delays in terms of timing to make it move as well.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to have a standard delay for the sake of it. You could add an amp after it, or you could do some sort of different modulation so it moves a little bit differently.
Okay.
You'll notice in that slapback delay there's an amp there as well, so you can create a bit of a old school vibe. So when you guys go through the settings, just try switching that on and off as well.
So you've looked at a lot of tips, but
Yeah.
are there any obvious mistakes that you can safeguard people against?
I think the main thing is balance.
Yeah.
So if you don't get the balance right of the vocal, or the vocal is, 2 dB too loud, or 2 dB too soft, you can actually take away from the song. So the best way to check it is to, have your volume down all the way so you can just barely hear the song, and see if your vocal is cutting through or it's actually stepping behind the band, for example. Then sort of fine tune it from there. So, everything will sound good when it's loud, but the thing is to try to get it sounding good at low level so you can really hear everything.
So that's a really good test.
So find the balance, even crank the volume of your speakers or whatnot and walk outside the room and see if that is poking out or it's still behind the vocal, behind the band and so forth. But I think that's the biggest thing, is to make it sound with the track and not sort of detached.
Yeah.
So I use effects to sort of tie it in together. We can have just a quick listen with and without all the stuff, so you can get a feel for, just those simple things as parallels and so forth, what it adds. So I'll start with it off. The original vocal.
As I hold your hand, and I feel myself
Without.
lifting up.
That seems quite boring and detached from the song, but with all the stuff that we went through today, even though we've gone through it quickly,
Close to mine.
adds that life and sparkle to the track.
Yeah, really does.
And those cool little things like slapbacks and different delay movements and automation and the reverb adds that journey to the track. So it's a good sort of thing. And remember, automation is the key with all this stuff. Like, I'll spend so long just automating everything as well. So I think you need to just spend a little bit of time crafting the sound a little bit. But hopefully the stuff that we've gone through today will give you a good starting point as well.
Definitely. We've had a few questions in on the YouTube comments, if you don't mind. Let's have a look. We had Alexander Verd ask, why is the vocal track in stereo and not mono?
This is a stem that I got given from the producer. So I usually just mono it. Anything that needs to be mono should be mono. But in this instance, I was lazy and I didn't do it. But usually I would do it.
We've had a lot of people asking who the vocalist is.
The vocalist is,
he's great.
Yeah, he's amazing. It's an artist called Lloyd Cole. So he was a student here as well. So I've just worked on a few different projects with him, and yeah, you can hear he's the biz.
Very good. Let's have a look. Lewis Dodkins has asked, can Ganesh give some tips on fitting a vocal in the mix of a track with heavy instrumentation?
Heavy instrumentation, like, I guess when you get stuff with a lot more elements going on in the track, then you need to push these things a little bit harder. So, you might have to do a little bit more with the parallels or add a little bit more of that in. Distortion is a really good thing, especially with making things cut through.
Right.
And as I said, you can automate things in the choruses when the elements all pick up in intensity. You have things that you can automate. So those little quick things that you can do will sort of get you out of a lot of trouble. But I think it's getting the the right tone of the vocal, using your parallels and distortions,
Yeah.
and just making it feel more upfront. It's a good way of competing with a lot of elements.
Okay, great, thanks. And then we had another one about side chaining. RTC Official asks, how do you sidechain vocals if you need to? I mean, do we have time to go into that
Yeah,
today?
no, it's quick. It's like sidechaining your bass with a kick drum. But sometimes what I do with vocals, if something's colliding with the vocal, like a synth or guitar, what I do is I send a copy of that vocal into the synth or guitar and add a sidechain to it. So every time the vocal hits, the guitar or synth pushes back.
Okay.
To allow space for the vocal to talk.
So that still comes forward.
Yeah, and then it can sort of interplay like that. So it's a good way of sort of cheating in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a quick thing, but you know, when you mix, you want to be creative and do things spontaneously. You know, so you create all those special moments in a way. So that's a good way of doing it. Is I've done that a lot and just sidechain vocals into various elements as well.
Yeah.
So just make space for your vocalist to cut through.
Yeah. And you can find out more on our mixing and mastering courses,
Yeah, that's
of
right,
course. Yeah, check those out on the website, pointblanklondon.com. Let's see if we have time for another question. Andrew Reynoldson says, would you scale back the reverb on a faster track with a vocal like this and maybe use a short delay for ambience instead?
Yeah, I mean, I use delays for creating space and setting a scene as well. But, you know, if you're working with an MC, for example, there is literally no reverb or a very short reverb. So anything under a second, like it's a really tight thing. If the vocal is quite busy and, you know, a lot's going on, you don't want the reverb to sort of trip over all the other elements. So space is a crucial thing. But with this song, it's quite open, so I can afford to go a little bit longer with my reverb tails. And, you know, as you hear about the slapback, it adds a cool texture and environment to it. So you can use delays like a reverb as well. You know, if you have enough delays, you can almost create a reverb sound. So delays is a huge thing, but it's good. It's good fun. It just helps your track bounce as well. And having it at the right tempo is the important thing. So just sync it up to the tempo of the track, so the delays don't fall over each other and sort of make the mix very untidy as well. So just have it bang on.
Okay. And I know obviously we didn't look at recording vocals particularly today, but are there any tips on recording vocals at home just so it makes this next stage easier for people?
I think gain structure is the most important thing. So having your preamp and compressor at the right setting. So if you're not too comfortable with compressors, but you have to use it just to control the vocalist a bit, I say do medium attack, medium release as a safety, because you're not going too much either way.
Right, okay.
And when you're compressing vocals, when you're recording in particular, don't over compress it because it's hard to get back that life.
Right, yeah.
So you're looking at maybe 2 to 3 dB or maximum 5 dB. Because like I was saying before, when they hit the chorus and it wants to explode, you don't want the compressor to be working against the singer. Because every time they want to go big, the compressor goes, no, you don't. So you got to be careful.
Disapproving parent.
Yeah, it's like, no, you don't do that. So you got to be careful with that sort of stuff. And having a good space to record in is also very important. If you're in your room, just walk around and just test it out with your voice where it sounds most natural, and maybe place a mic there. And having a distance of maybe that from the vocal mic as well is a good starting point. Too close, you can overload the microphone.
And then you've got more problems with sibilance as well, so using a pop shield or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big thing, but there's some good guide points, I think. And if you're working with a vocalist, the headphone mixes are the most important thing, because you want them to vibe when they deliver stuff like this. You know, it's the emotion that you need. So the technical stuff is one thing, but the other stuff is a whole other, a whole other topic.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much, Ganesh. I think we're out of time for this week. So hopefully that's given you plenty of inspiration for your weekend of music making. And remember, you can find out more about our courses in London, Los Angeles, and online by visiting our website, pointblanklondon.com. We'll be back next week with another Friday Forum Live. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.